interrupt the storyline Kids Not Allowed, so I figured I'd read the 2 story submissions that I put together to make this story for you. One is pretty short and the other is very long. I'll do the short one first. I wanted to share a story that happened to me with my child. He has been wheelchair bound his whole life, and it has caused me to go no contact with my family because they do not include him in anything or make any extra accommodations when we make plans or trips with family, including weddings. The icing on the cake was my cousin's wedding. I was contacted a few months later to say they made the decision to go no kids at the wedding. Not a problem at all. I made plans with our sitter to watch him for the night. My husband and I went to the wedding. We show up to the wedding and there are kids everywhere. I was a bit upset because they made it very clear that there were to be no kids at the wedding, and when I was sitting there at dinner, I counted at least 16 kids. We had several family members come up asking where Philip was, and I explained that he wasn't invited. That's when the truth came out. My cousin and my parents thought that it was best that Philip didn't come because his wheelchair always got in the way, and it might look bad in their wedding pictures. When I heard that, we quietly grabbed our things and we left the wedding. Kids were invited, just not my kid, and it was on purpose. My mother reached out asking where we were, and she admitted that that conversation did happen, but she meant no harm, and that was enough for me to never talk to any of them again. Philip is doing great, thriving and living his best life, and we are very close to my husband's family, who are very supportive and helpful, and love Philip very, very much. So that was the first part of the story, and that's what inspired the storyline with Lucy. Now here's the second story submission. I'm submitting this because every time I see a child-free wedding debate, I immediately think of this experience, and I'm almost certain my youngest sibling will forever be our family's biggest bridezilla. All names have already been changed. I am from a very small rural town, the kind where you check family trees before dating. There are no stoplights, and people either stay forever or leave as soon as they can, and I am the one who left. I moved halfway across the country 7 weeks after graduating high school and only returned for the holidays and family events. After college, I settled in LA, where I met my husband. I'm the oldest of 10 cousins. At the time of this story, I was the only one who had left town and was also the only one who was married with a child. My pregnancy and delivery were incredibly complicated, and my daughter was born with multiple medical issues. She struggled with failure to thrive until first grade. Because of her needs, I stopped working and became her full-time caregiver. These details matter to my bridezilla experience that I had with my sister. When my youngest sibling, Connie, got married, my daughter was 3 years old. The wedding invitation addressed to me used my maiden name, and it literally said my first name, maiden name, plus husband. That was it. My husband and I have been married for almost 5 years at this point, and there's no way Connie didn't know his name or my married last name. At my own wedding, my parents required me to invite all family members, their spouses, and all of their children. But when I asked, I was told that this was a child-free wedding. The only exception, Connie's best friends, 2 daughters, were going to be the flower girls. I asked the obvious question: what was I supposed to do with my 3-year-old that's medically fragile when we're traveling so far from home? Connie responded, hire a babysitter. I explained that everyone I knew locally would be attending the wedding. Her response, that it was my problem to figure it out, and if it was that big of a deal, I should have just have someone watch my daughter at my house for a few days. Yes, she expected me to leave my medically fragile toddler behind for an entire weekend. The only person who had ever watched Lily was my mother-in-law. She would have said yes, had we have asked. But prompt medical treatment and decisions made by someone who knows exactly what's happening was key if something was there to happen. I could not risk not having my husband or myself right there to make those decisions. It was just too much to leave my mother-in-law with that, so we had to take Lily with us. Everything in me was saying not to go, but I was raised with the family is everything, you always show up mindset, so we went. I actually traveled there 3 times. First, I traveled home alone for the bridal shower, then again alone for the bachelorette party. The only information I received for either of those events, dress codes and gift card registry details. Yes, there was dress cards for both, and each had a different gift registry. I didn't receive a thank you, a verbal or written, or any of those gifts, or even an acknowledgement of traveling multiple times. Finally, the 3 of us travel for the wedding. Looking back over a decade later, I guess I had the option of going solo and having my husband stay with Lily, but that thought didn't even cross my mind at the time. The only reasoning I have for this is I spent several years in a toxic relationship in high school with someone who still lived in my town and was very good friends with one of my brothers and my cousins. I guess the fear of him being invited for some reason or running into him kept me saying that my husband should not stay home with Lily as an option. The bridal shower and bachelorette party were both girl-only events and weren't right in our hometown like the wedding was, so I didn't even consider the possibility of seeing him. I managed to arrange childcare by contacting a family I used to babysit for. Their youngest daughter, now a high school senior, agreed to watch my daughter at my parents' house, which was about 30 minutes from the venue. This was a reasonable distance if Lily needed us, especially since my husband's lead foot would get there faster if needed. When we arrived at the wedding, I immediately saw multiple toddlers sitting with their parents, and I was furious. We ended up sitting with a childhood friend, Patrick, and his wife, Haley, since we weren't included in the family seating. That was apparently only for people in the ceremony. The first thing they asked was, "Where's Lily?" I honestly was so upset I couldn't answer, so my husband said she wasn't invited, and Haley was shocked. You're joking. Nope, we confirmed it, child-free wedding, except for the 2 flower girls, he said with a noticeable eye roll, gesturing towards the very obvious group of toddlers nearby. During cocktail hour, Patrick did some digging. It turns out that several guests with the weddings lived out of the area and had originally RSVP'd no because they could not find childcare. They were told it was totally fine to bring their children. In other words, our exact situation, but totally different rules. I wanted to say something to Connie so badly, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, I found my Aunt Kathy and quietly vented while we watched the chaos unfold. The chaos is the right word. This wasn't a wedding, it was a circus. Per the invitation, ceremony was supposed to start at 5. Guests were seated at 4:45, but it didn't begin until 5:55. It was 105 degrees outdoors next to a barn. The dress code was semi-formal. There were no tents, no fans, no shade. We were miserable. The ceremony itself lasted over an hour and a half. No, this wasn't a full church service. I'm not even sure why it took that long. By the time cocktail hour started, the food had been sitting out so long it was cold. They served mashed potatoes and martini glasses with the topping bar and a gravy fountain, which notably was not heated. Cold mashed potatoes are bad enough, but cold, chunky gravy is even worse. Dinner was not served until 9:30, over an hour of speeches and a very long photo session. By that point, the bar had run out of beer and wine, was nearly out, and there was only water, the only 3 drinks available. We had hired our babysitter from 4 to 11. When cold pasta and rubbery chicken finally hit the table, we decided we were done. We said our quick goodbyes to Kathy, Patrick, and Haley, and we left. There was a special music aspect of the reception happening, so I didn't risk interrupting anybody else to say anything to my parents, grandparents, or siblings, so we just left quietly. I texted my mom once we were 15 minutes down the road, so she would know that we had headed home to relieve the babysitter. On the drive back, we stopped at a gas station for food, chicken taquitos for me, and a hot dog for my husband because we were starving. We had originally planned to stay in town for a few days after the wedding, but we changed our flights to the next day. While waiting in the airport, I called my mother-in-law and ended up crying on the phone while my husband kept our daughter distracted. The most hurtful part, Connie didn't even notice we left, and my parents didn't care at all that we went home early. Oh, and I never received a thank you for the notes. About a year later, I turned out Connie hadn't opened any of the cards or gifts from the wedding and never cashed the checks. She had apparently only opened cards looking for cash. They took the cash on their honeymoon. I also found out they went over their budget threefold. She and her husband promised to pay the overage after their honeymoon, but they never did. Because she never cashed our check, we took our $500 check we gave for the wedding and the $100 check I gave for the bachelorette gift, and we took a $600 trip to San Francisco. Also, now Connie has a 5 and 7-year-old. Last month, she was complaining to me about trying to figure out what to do because she was invited to a child-free wedding this summer, and it was so far from home to leave the girls for the weekend with the grandparents. I quickly said to her, do what I did 11 years ago and take them with you and then hire a babysitter. It's not that hard. So that was it. That was the second story. I did not dive into the chaos that happened at the wedding. However, I think I will use that part as an inspiration for future skits. I really leaned into the no kids storyline. I hope you guys enjoyed that one.